Hi everyone, welcome to part 2. Okay, Kamsky has just played c6, and Topalov continued with h takes g6, which is a sharp continuation. Obviously he wants to open the h file, but really this gives black as much play as white. He may have been considering rook takes h6 followed up with e4, but black's pressure on the queen side makes this too dangerous. Rook d2 instead was a more solid move, but unsuited to his attacking style. After h takes g6, black is threatening bishop takes e3 check, followed up with the rook takes h1. So Topalov played rook d2, which stops this threat and makes the knight takes a2 variants we saw with knight takes c3, b takes c3. Now it's now unplayable because the rook will be defending a2. But this seems like a strange move to play because it also means that white can never hope to play e4 because the h6 bishop has its sights on this rook. Playing instead bishop e2 would have been more consistent. Despite allowing black to win the a2 pawn, white should be able to defend okay and try to find some play of his own. With the position how it is, the white pieces aren't well coordinated, and it's clunky and the pieces are getting in each other's way. Another possible move for Topalov was knight e5, although it too was dropping the a2 pawn, and Kamsky now prevented it anyway with f6, which is a calm defensive move amidst the complex of tactics on the board. This also prepares king f7 to make sure the king is safe, as well as the rook at h8 from this rook on h1. With this move f6, the grandmasters watching the game were of the opinion that Kamsky was gaining the upper hand, and that Topalov's risky opening choice had backfired. He worsened the situation now with an inaccurate move, knight e4. And it does make sense to get the knight to a good central square and avoid the loss of the a2 pawn, because now there's no knight takes c3 of course, but again bishop e2 was the right move, where after bishop f5 we would have an approximately equal position. This move, knight e4, brings into question the soundness of rook d2, as now the rook serves little purpose where it is, and has only resulted in a loss of time through moving it, which will be worsened in a few moves when Topalov returns it to d1, which is another reason why bishop e2 was a better move. So here Kamsky played b6, which is another calm defensive move, this time preventing knight c5, and preparing a later c5. So bishop e2, Topalov finally sees the line, and now queen c8, which is a strong move from Kamsky, preparing some nasty tactics with the c5 push and the queen eyeing the king on c1, as well as ensuring that the e6 bishop isn't a tactical liability, which could have been a problem in some lines. So Topalov continued with the rook h4, which is presumably aiming to double rooks on the h file, but this was another weak move. His real strength is attacking, and he often doesn't do well when under a lot of pressure and has to defend. Stockfish preferred the line instead, rook d1, although this allows a nice tactical shot, knight takes a2 check, because after queen takes a2, there's knight c3, which discovers an attack on the queen, and also threatens the rook on d1, although this would relieve the pressure from on the white position. So although it wins material, it's not necessarily the correct way to continue. And the knight here is attacking the bishop as well, and the queen has to move because of the attack from this bishop, and the queen is unable to defend the bishop. And if the bishop is allowed to be taken, then black has simply won a pawn and destroyed the white position. So the best play is to sack the queen for 3 minor pieces with knight takes c3, and after bishop takes a2, knight takes a2, and black's advantage is only slightly more than in the game continuation. This would have been very dynamic and interesting play, yet it's hard not to favor black for the rest of the game with the queen. Okay, back to the game continuation. Rook h4 is what Topalov has just played. And now comes king f7, which creates a very nice position and results in a good edge for black. It's hard for white to create any threats here, so Kamsky is strengthening his position to the maximum before taking decisive action. In many of the variations we looked at before, the knight takes a2 continuations were possible and won a pawn, but would have released the pressure on Topalov. I think it's very instructive how Kamsky elects instead to mount increasing pressure, resulting in ill-advised play from Topalov, as he has to live with the pressure and continue to calculate attacking variations with every move that prepares them. As soon as the attack has begun, there are fewer moves to consider, so it's very nice play from Kamsky. And rook d1 is what Topalov played here, which was a weak move by all accounts. You know, it's just lots of shuffling around with this rook and it's achieved little. Knight c3 was a better move, all things considered. A major factor in this position is Topalov's stranded queen on a3, which is contributing nothing to the game and, on the contrary, preventing the nicely posted b4 knight from being kicked with a3, and he just isn't given the time to move the queen and play e3, so it's again very nice play from Kamsky. And here he now has some very nice tactical choices. He went for g5, which knocks back the rook and is a strong move and played with psychology in mind, because rook h1 is the best move, after which Topalov can't double rooks on the h-file as he intended. There are a couple of other interesting continuations that were worth consideration too. One was knight takes a2 check, again with tactics on the queen in mind. Best play goes queen takes a2, knight takes e3, which discovers an attack on the queen. So queen a4, now knight takes d1, with check from the bishop on h6, so it forces king takes d1, and black has a comfortable edge with 2 extra pawns and a rook against 2 minor pieces. But as before, this results in a releasing of the pressure on the white position, and so it's no surprise that Kamsky didn't choose it. A stronger continuation, instead of g5, is bishop f5, where best play goes knight c3 and now queen e6, which sets up some very nice tactics on e3 and a2, with the hope of going into a better endgame after a lot of simplification. But as before, this releases the pressure on Topalov, and Kamsky wants to milk the position and get as much out of it as he can, so consistent with his earlier play, he mounts pressure instead. So g5 is what he played here, and rook h2 is how Topalov responded, which is the incorrect rook retreat. As I said, rook h1 was the best, so it's once more very nice psychological play from Kamsky, giving his opponent the difficult choice between logical accuracy and human desire. Now Kamsky is able to play g4, which kicks back the knight to d2 and allows the pawn sack c5, which pretty much forces d takes c5, and thus permits f5, which is Kamsky's key breakthrough idea. With this knight moved, there's no knight g5 check, so it's again very nice. And Topalov now tried the desperate defense rook takes h6, and this is losing, but it's hard to find anything better. He has to try something. Fritz preferred, instead of rook takes h6, bishop e5, and f takes e4 forces knight takes e4. If instead bishop takes h8, queen takes c5 check is very strong. So knight takes e4, now simply rook h7, and black remains a long way in front. But by this stage, Topalov's position is losing, and it's strange because it's hard to pinpoint a single losing move in the game. Rather, it was a series of inaccurate moves and indecision whilst trying to come up with an effective counterplan. So rook takes h6 anyway. Now, of course, rook takes h6 and knight g5 check. And this is Topalov's defensive idea, perhaps hoping for a simplification in order to relieve the pressure. Kamsky just plays king f8, so knight takes e6, queen takes e6, and now bishop c4, pinning the knight from Topalov, but rook c8 is the nail in the coffin, and this surely seals Topalov's fate. Far weaker is b takes c5, where white can almost hold with bishop f4, rook h5 and f3, although it's still very tough. So rook c8, and now bishop f4, attacking the rook, and Kamsky chose to keep it on the third rank at f6, from where it can swing over to c6 later after the queen moves. And Topalov must have been hoping for some initiative of his own, because here he played e4, and now Kamsky played a great move. If you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Rook takes c5 is the move, which allows his knight to fall, because after e takes d5 comes queen takes d5. And white, despite material now being numerically equal, is completely lost and stuck in the middle of a tactical disaster. There's no bishop takes d5, of course, because the bishop is pinned by the rook. And the immediate threat is rook takes c4 check, but that's only the beginning of Topalov's woes here. Defending the bishop with pieces doesn't work, because Kamsky can simply play b5 next, so the only way to save the bishop for now is with b3, which Topalov played, but now comes queen d4, because the diagonal to the king has been weakened by the pawn move b3, and the threat is not queen a1 check, but queen c3 check, king b1, queen c2 check, king a1, and queen takes d1. What's more, this move is played with tempo because it attacks the loose bishop on f4. And Topalov blundered now with bishop e3, but there was no way to save the position by this stage. After queen c3 check, Topalov resigned, seeing that the rook was falling on that continuation we just saw. So it was an incredible game from Kamsky, who punished Topalov's dubious opening play beautifully. In the final position, Topalov's queen has spent 23 moves on a3, achieving nothing. It's only the third time Kamsky's beaten Topalov in 20 attempts, and now the pressure will really be on the latter, as he has to win one back to stay in the match. There are only 2 games remaining, and tomorrow he has to play with the black pieces. So it's on at the same time, same place. Hope to see you there. Thanks very much.